All right, hi team. Thank you for watching this video before our next meeting. I'm sending it to you over winter break, and I know that you're probably at home with your family, so no pressure to sit through this whole thing now. But when you return to your offices, I want you to take a look at some of the information that I was able to dissect from our Winter Training 2012 evaluation. If you remember, the evaluation was a combination of qualitative and quantitative questions that we asked our staff regarding each session that they attended during the winter training program. Our feedback rate was really good. I just wanted to give a shout out to Whitney Hall. 25% of respondents were from your community. That's really wonderful. I know you have the largest community, but your team was obviously really incentivized and interested in giving feedback, and the feedback was really good. I also wanted to thank University Village, not far behind with 22% of respondents, also a large community. But for all of us, we had pretty good feedback rates. I think about 80% of our overall team did give feedback through the survey at least, and then a good portion were able to give feedback through the qualitative questionnaire that I emailed out to everyone. If you remember the questions, they were Likert scale, and every session was evaluated twofold. The first was, how valuable do you feel that the training was for you as a resident assistant, or as for a member of the professional staff, or as a member of the central office team or the administrative team, etc. and so on. So for each individual, how valuable was this particular session to you? And then a follow-up question, when you think about the value of this program, how important is it that people in your position know this content? So it wasn't necessarily evaluating the session itself, the second part, it was more evaluating the value of the content to them. The reason for that is we're starting to think more and more about who needs to be involved in what training program so that we can have a higher level of engagement and value and meaning, and also a larger diversity of programs offered to our team. Really no point in having 100% of our staff in a session that only about 25% really need to attend. So remember that a high value rating means that the information was good and that it was presented well, and that a high importance rating means it needs to be continued for RA training at least. Okay, I do want to go back to this slide. We did have a little bit of a halo effect. For those of you who don't remember from graduate school, that means that most people hovered around the neither agree nor disagree, or basically middle of the road statements. So just keep that in mind as we go through the feedback. Okay, so starting off with the off-campus adventure session. That's the entire series of sessions that occurred throughout the Toy Story Day. It was a team building day. So the first outcome that we wanted to measure was whether or not they actually felt it bonded their team. That's the value assessment. And as you see, our peak, the highest frequency, was in the agree point. So that's good. That's very good. The second value set was whether or not they felt that bonding with their team, or having a day set aside to bond with their team, was important at this particular time. And you can see, again, most people agree with that. When you consider the fact that there's about a 10-person gap, or 5-person gap between whether or not it actually did what we wanted it to do and whether or not that's valuable, you see that the people who thought that it actually did bond the team mostly thought that it was important, but a few did not. So, successful program. Programming to Infinity and Beyond. This was the session that Chad ran about programming model requirements and how to implement the programming and education model. Helped prepare the team for spring term programming. That was our outcome. We wanted to make them feel prepared for implementing this model in spring term. Again, and you'll find this pretty much across the board. Most people hovered in the agree, and a few were in the neither agree nor disagree. Very, very few down in the disagree or strongly disagree point. The second outcome, helped preparing for spring quarter was important, or for spring semester was important. More people felt it was important than it was valuable, but the difference there again is about 5 people, less than 5 people. So another successful program. So the 2 p.m. pro staff sessions, this was a cyclical session, essentially conference style. We had about 48% of our overall attendance at the To Infinity and Beyond Unless You're Broke session. That was a social justice and socioeconomic status education program. Of those, 77% agree or strongly agree that it was valuable. So great job to the presenter there. No two toys are alike. That was another diversity program. 39% of our attendees were there. 76% agree or strongly agree that it was valuable. Again, excellent. TA training, 9% attendance. That's basically the TAs and a couple of professional staff who were presenting. We didn't measure the values there because TA training was a separate assessment. And then 4% non-applicable attendance rate. There were a couple of students who had to miss this session due to registration, and there were a couple of pro staff who had to prepare their own sessions. So that would be why there was a non-attendance rate. The 3 p.m. sessions. This was a life after the RA position organization. So Houston, we have a problem. 26% attendees. 86% agree or strongly agree it was valuable. So outstanding reception to that program. Graduate School, the Inside Scoop, 44% attendance. That's high. That means we obviously know that there's an interest in graduate school for our undergraduate employees. So getting some education and insight on that would be useful in the future. 88% agree or strongly agree it was valuable. So obviously we need to pull on those individuals again to present this topic again. Assessing Res Life, putting your feedback to use, with 19% attendance, wasn't super highly attended. And those who attended pretty much agreed or strongly agreed it was valuable, with 70% agree or strongly agree. Again, 9% TA and 2% not applicable, so a few students returned from their previous session. And the 4 p.m. pro staff sessions. So there's a snake in my Prada boot was the session associating socioeconomic status and general millennial attitude. That was an interesting session. Had about 57% attendance, so it was highly attended. It was okay with reception. About 74% agree or strongly agree it was valuable. And the returning SRA process, the remaining 37 attendance, 70% agree or strongly agree it was valuable. So I think that that is more of an inherent structure that we have put in place from history that we need to continue. I just think we need to revamp how that program is planned and marketed to our employees. And then 6% non-attendance, that was a high registration time. Life after the RA position. So the outcome here was to articulate connections between the RA position and personal and professional goals through resume development, interview building skills. So this was really helping our non-returning staff move on to the more professional level positions and allow us as professionals to advise them and counsel them into, coach them into the right positions, hopefully in our department. So interview skills, highly received. So interview workshop helped interview skills, very highly received there. Almost no disagree or strongly disagree. In fact, there is none. Okay, that's great. Interviewing skills are important. Everyone agreed. So what this graph is actually telling us, because they're so closely aligned, is that this is an important session that needs to be continued in a very similar format that it was this year. Okay, so that is something we need to consider. The resume development workshop has a little bit more of a disjoint. Okay, so resume workshop helped transfer skills. Remember, we wanted them to actually take the skills and ideas we were talking to them about for the resume, and that our Career Services Center was talking to them about the resume and actually build a resume. Most students felt that was important. Transferring skills important. There were some students who may not have felt it was as important to talk about now as it was to talk about interviewing skills. As you can see, there is more than 0% here. I would say probably 1 or maybe 2 students. So something we need to think about is resume development, where we want to focus. Professional communication was another highly well-received session. So very high, 25, 26 frequency for agree, about 16 frequency for strongly agree. That's a good portion of our team. Professional community or communication workshop was important. Very little distance between the 2 lines, meaning that yes, they did generally feel it was important and it was valuable. All right, so RALC, Resident Advisor Leadership Conference. This was new for us this year, and I will say it was very well received. Something that we'll need to continue in the future. So the outcome was demonstrate the ability to present professional workshops. So I don't know that we necessarily met that outcome. That might be an outcome we need to revise in the future because only 78% of the respondents said, 78% of the respondents said they did not submit a RALC proposal, which means only 22% actually did. Of those 22%, 100% actually did present. So that's not a huge portion of our team presenting. So the 1 p.m. session, Caring for Your Character, got 17% of the attendance rate, with only 67% agree or strongly agree that it was valuable. So supervisor of that presenter or those presenters might want to have a conversation about how to maybe more effectively market their presentations in the future to make sure that their audience understands its purpose. 20% of the attendance went to Finding Me Again, 73% agree or strongly agree, so that's pretty good. The really exciting one here was the Relaxation, Just Let It Go. 77% agree or strongly agree. I mean, that's comparable to our professional staff sessions with 56% attendance rate, so very attractive and very receptive. All right, so dealing with student pregnancy and attendance, or student pregnancy, 35% attendance, so there were some students who were obviously concerned about that. Of those students, almost all of them were female, just so you know from the demographics. 79% agree or strongly agree it was valuable. Okay, so something we want to consider as a topic for maybe just our female team members. It's just such a specialized topic, it's hard to say whether the male attendee group would find it valuable or not. Safe Zone Part 1. I was surprised that it only had 22% attendance. I think that might be because it was a 2-part series and the team really wanted to go to various sessions, but this is something we need to pull in, and maybe something we want to pull in as a mandatory training. For 100% agree or strongly agree that it was valuable, that's obviously critical for us. Thinking Outside the Box, 35% attendance. They felt that that was an important session. 95% agree or strongly agree it was valuable. Extremely well received. So pat on the back for that presenter and for that designer so that we can give them some recognition. All right, so the 3 p.m. session, Cures for Disorganization and Procrastination, 48% attendance. Obviously, that's something that our team does struggle with at times. 65% agree it was good. Safe Zone Part 2, again, 22% attendance with 100% value rating. And Practical Leadership, 22% attendance, 75% felt it was okay. It was good. Ethics and Integrity, the 4 p.m. sessions, 11% attendance, not a high percentage rate. I'm concerned about that. But 83% felt it was valuable. So this may be a conversation that we want to pull in hall later. Not a high attendance rate, but something that I think is obviously important that we, as professional staff want to incorporate into our training more. The Joys of Being an RA, only 13% attendance with 71% agree or strongly agree. The My Little Pony session, 52% attendance. I think that's a pretty catchy idea, incorporating pop culture into student development. 75% agree or strongly agree it was valuable. And the returner rate was 19% attendance. 100% of those were returners, and 100% agree that it was valuable. So we may just want to do a breakout for returners, for continuing staff members, so that they can have that conversation more formally. Okay, this was a mandated training. There's no making this go away. Harassment and discrimination, fortunately, was pretty well received. So harassment training helped define boundaries. We really wanted them to understand how the boundaries they have with each other and the boundaries they have with their students is legally and ethically critical to know. A vast majority agreed. Some were in the neutral category. Very few were down here. And then defining boundaries. Yeah, they felt it was important. So when we talk about these 24, maybe 23 individuals who said not only what did it help define the boundaries, but it was important, this is really meeting the mark for them. All right, so the business side, we have to talk about this. It was really hard to calculate return on investment for a couple of reasons. Most of our professional staff are exempt, so there isn't necessarily an hourly wage, knowing that we work far over 40 hours, right, for the most part during this week because of the amount of responsibilities we have with training. Our student staff are also not paid hourly at training. They're paid in exchange for their room and board and as a leadership opportunity. So to really consider the costs here, we had to do some estimation. We did do a calculation of hourly rate based off the number of hours pro staff were actually in sessions, not necessarily the number of hours they were spending planning sessions, since that information was not readily available. So the gains here were the income, about $3,500. It was estimated that we had a 10% reduction in attrition. We'll find out when the spring term begins, because last year we had a certain number of students and employees leave between the terms, and when asked why, a large portion of that was really feeling sort of a lack of self-efficacy and dealing with issues that only come into contact with in spring term. And an estimated $1,000 was a reduction in staff retraining time, so we had to look at some past behavioral contracts that were put in place from professional staff to student staff regarding reiterating expectations brought forward in the previous winter trainings, and we figured that was pretty close to $1,000. It was in the almost $1,100 range, but we went a little bit conservative with our estimates here. Costs, the only thing exact here is the $1,754 for meals and supplies. That was actually a reduction from last year by almost $200, so we felt very good about that. And they were always, all of the meals were well received and inclusive of different dining needs, and our supplies were a heavier portion of our budget, because we wanted to have more sort of incentivization for the engagement. So we did some prizes and things like that. We did an estimate of $1,200 in exempt and hourly staff time. So again, this was a total estimate, but it's pretty close to what we actually spent in terms of number of hours in the training sessions. The return on investment was $18.48. We don't know if that's good or not. We know it's positive, and so it's not bad. And as a nonprofit, anything that's positive is good. But we don't know what past ROI has been. So we're going to continue this level of assessment. We're going to hopefully keep a little bit better track and a little bit better grasp on how much time team members are spending on developing the training programs in order to evaluate this better in the future. So that's all I've got for you all. I just want to thank you for listening. If you are at home with your families, please do close this down now and don't think too much more about it until you get back to campus. Have a great winter break, everybody.